There we go. So this is the fifth workshop brought to you by Action Funder, and the first one that's going to be led by 180 Degrees, who I'll introduce in just a minute. And for those of you who don't know, Action Funder is a brand new platform that was recently launched by Semble. And it's a platform that's super easy to use, and it matches community projects with funding opportunities. If you have any questions about Action Funder, don't hesitate to ask in the chat or stick around till the end, and myself or my colleague Perrine will be able to answer any questions. So I'm Lorna, I'm from Semble and the Action Funder team, and also here from the same team is Perrine, who you will see in one of the boxes on the screen waving. It'd be great if you could just pop into the chat where you are today, the type of community organisation that you're involved with. So if you aren't yet familiar, the chat's just going to be at the bottom of your screen, a nice little speech bubble. If you select there, you can start writing. And while you do that, a reminder of those house rules. Do try and keep your cameras on if you can. Mics off so we can hear everything that the 180 team has to say, and any questions you have through the session, just stick them into the chat and we'll pick them up at the end of the session when we're going to have a bit of a discussion and a conversation and unpick anything that you haven't been sure of throughout what's coming up. So good to see a few people writing in there. Colleen from St Luke's Community Centre in London, and then from London all the way to Dundee. Sean from 18 and under. It's one of the really great things about these digital sessions that you can get people from all over the country. So leading today's session, most important people in the room, the 180 Degrees consulting team. So we have Vanessa and Fiorella with us today. 180 Degrees is a consultancy for nonprofits. So they work with registered charities and also informal community groups. And they work around the world supporting with everything from revenue generation to marketing. And they work with big household names, whether it's UNHCR or Oxfam or Amnesty, St John Ambulance. And they're unique in that they're staffed by carefully selected university students who volunteer their time to do this work. And the students here with us today, Vanessa and Fiorella, are from Queen Mary, London, and they have plenty of useful tips and tricks and guides on the topic of volunteer management. So with a final hello to Rebecca from Community Workshop and Gardens in Surrey, and also Keith from Vale of Snaith Action Group in Yorkshire. We have a really good spread there geographically, don't we? So let's get on with it. I'm going to hand over to Vanessa and Fiorella.
Hi everyone, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Vanessa and I am a volunteer consultant for 180 Degrees Consulting, and I'm as well a current university student studying economics. And Perrine, if you wouldn't mind sharing the slides. Thank you so much. Could you move to the next slide, please? Yes, so just briefly on the agenda, we're moving now to the volunteer management session delivered by me and my colleague Fiorella. And afterwards, we'll do a short Q&A, so make sure to drop any questions you have on the chat, and we'll make our best efforts to answer as many questions as we can. And then Action Funder will have their Q&A as well in the end of the session. So make sure to type down any questions you have for them as well. Next slide, please.
So hi everyone, my name is Fiorella and I'm currently studying economics at Queen Mary with Vanessa. So just a quick introduction about 180. So both me and Vanessa work for it, and we've been selected by 180, and we've been provided a training of professional standard, and we are basically helping Semble to produce these workshops that will help you in the long term to increase your revenue and your profit. So if you could move on to the next slide. So we've decided to start with volunteer management. Why have we decided this topic? So volunteer management process increases volunteer engagement, improves retention rates, and free up their volunteer coordination time to focus on other aspects of the organization. Volunteerism is a foundational component for almost all organizations in the nonprofit industry. So volunteers provide their time in exchange for the opportunity to make a difference within their community. So, and I think most nonprofit organizations would agree with me when I say that they would be unable to make the impact they are making without the help of the volunteers. So definitely volunteer management is the most important aspect that we would like to discuss, and that's why we wanted to start with it. And we wanted to talk about why nonprofit organizations need to organize, promote, and communicate their different volunteer programs within the community so that more volunteers can be reached and then they can come and join your associate organizations. Next slide.
So some of the main problem areas that your organizations like yours might be struggling with when it comes to volunteers are recruitment and in management, as well as retention. So when it comes to recruitment, sometimes organizations might struggle to recruit enough volunteers, and we don't want that to happen because we want your organization to run at its full potential, and we want your community group to be able to make the greatest impact it possibly can. So another issue might be in management. You want to make it easy for volunteers to participate. You want to manage them effectively to make the most out of their time. And this good management will help you increase participation as well as volunteer engagement. And in retention, you spend many resources recruiting and training your volunteers. So it's only natural that you want to retain as many of them as possible. But your volunteers might leave your organization because of issues in their personal lives, which is out of your control, but some other factors are in your control that you can work on and retain as many volunteers as you possibly can. Next slide, please. So diving deeper into volunteer recruitment. Your goal, like I said, is to recruit volunteers whose values are aligned with your organization and to attract enough volunteers. So some ways that you can increase your volunteer recruitment rates is to have an inclusive recruitment process. So maybe avoid requiring too many qualifications or skills from them, especially if you can teach them this skill, because many volunteers see this as an opportunity to learn new skills, to acquire new skills. So having too many prerequisites from the get-go might scare them off. Another thing is to have the volunteer sign-up form in multiple languages. So if you want to attract volunteers from all sorts of backgrounds, make sure that the role description and application form is available in multiple languages. This is especially important if your community group is operating in an area that is very culturally diverse and you wish to include everyone in the community. Another point is to have a very clear description of the role, because this might be very obvious, but sometimes the barrier to applying is a lack of clarity and understanding of the role. So try to be as specific as you possibly can by stating how many hours they're expected to volunteer, maybe what sort of tasks they will be doing, who they will be working with, because you want to prevent volunteers dropping out because their expectations are not aligned with what the role actually is. That's another point to take into consideration. You can also try to make the role more appealing. Include pictures of your volunteers in action in your website or in the volunteer description role. This helps volunteers visualize the setting and picture themselves in that position. It's really a very powerful tool that gives them a better understanding of the role. So an example, if you think of this, you want to buy a t-shirt, you're on the website and they give you a description of the t-shirt's color, size, fabric, fit, everything, but they don't include a picture of the t-shirts that you want to buy. So chances are you probably wouldn't buy it. And that's why it's important to include pictures of your community group. You can also try to make the role more appealing by stating the beneficial outcomes of the role. What soft skills will they gain by volunteering in your community group? because there might be benefits that they didn't think of. Another important point is to advertise. Social media is a very powerful tool, as you all know. So make sure to have a presence on a wide array of social media platforms. Try to have an active presence, post regularly, so that potential volunteers can discover you, and to also let more people know about your community group, as well as update your current volunteers on your community group's activities. Next slide, please.
So now we will talk about volunteer management. So first of all, I would definitely say an efficient planning and scheduling would be ideal. So strong information would be very relevant. So therefore, we suggest using a database for volunteer management, which will allow the most effective use of volunteers and allocation of these volunteers. So which will facilitate scheduling. So first of all, you will need for detailed volunteers profiles for communication preference, contact information, volunteer history, and relevant skills or interests. I would also capture the volunteer activity, and also I would add information regarding structure and duties. For example, who oversees volunteers and who does we report to? And I would also add information regarding programs and strategies such as training, and how often would you train your volunteers, and who would be doing it. Secondly, poor planning and scheduling might be a primary cause of volunteer management failure. That's why we decided to provide a few solutions for you. So the second that we decided to provide is about childcare. So can your volunteers bring their children during volunteerships? Maybe consider offering some flexibility and childcare options that would allow volunteers to have their children supervised while at work. So that would be great and would allow more people to be able to join your program. And then we decided to add the languages as well, like Vanessa mentioned. It would be great if you could involve more languages, so more people with different backgrounds would be able to join. Fourth, we decided to talk about transportation. So how easily can volunteers reach your volunteer location? So maybe it might not be very easy. They might not be able to pay for car park, or maybe you can offer a carpool program. If one of you has a car, maybe talk and arrange a way to get to the volunteer allocation altogether. Or maybe you could provide information regarding public transportation, how to get there by tube or by bus easily for them. Our fifth point is about timing. So as you all know, most people have part-time jobs and full-time jobs. So maybe we would advise having different shifts, providing different shifts. So maybe something after 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. so different people can join. And obviously, we would like to say one last thing. We completely understand that you're small organizations and you might not be able to offer all of this. However, it could be very helpful and it could be really nice. So try and do as much as you can. And one last topic that I would like to add, it would be nice if you could add some food as well, like a meal would be nice. You could make them feel appreciated and it would increase their happiness, let's say, during their shifts. And maybe it would be also an occasion for all of them, for the volunteers to chat a bit, even if it's for 5-10 minutes, and maybe feel more welcome. Next slide.
So now diving deeper into volunteer retention, your goal is to keep your volunteers, the volunteers that you manage to recruit. You want to try to keep as many of them as you can. So I'm sure your volunteers are there because they really believe in your mission, but to keep them, you want your volunteers to also have an experience that's very enjoyable, that they find worth sharing and going back to. So you should really think of prioritizing your volunteer experience. And this can be done by making your goals clear, the goals of your community group. This will really help build motivation for your volunteers by establishing what success means to your organization. Being specific from the get-go with what you want will facilitate accomplishing your goals because volunteers will know what they are and will work towards them. They will be more motivated and see their purpose within the community group. And a tip for setting goals is the acronym SMART goals, for them to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time specific. Another tip for volunteer retention is by offering training. This can be obviously in-house training. You don't need to recruit external training to be provided. This can be in-house training provided by members of your community group. It doesn't have to be an extra cost to you because, you know, I'm sure that many members in your community group have loads of knowledge acquired from experience that they can transfer to your volunteers. This will help volunteers gain knowledge and confidence to perform well in their role and will be very fulfilling as they experience personal growth while volunteering in your community group. Another point to improve the volunteer experience is to prioritize regular volunteer recognition. Your volunteers want to know that their work is valued. So if they're unsure whether their hard work has made an impact in the community, they're less likely to continue volunteering and less likely to look for ways to deepen their relationship with your organization. So recognizing their efforts will really help boost morale. And some of the things you can do are issuing certificates with the number of hours your volunteers have contributed and outstanding achievements made by each volunteer. This can be done, let's say, in the end of the year by awarding a little diploma to each volunteer. You can host a small start of year or end of year volunteer appreciation event. You know, this can be a small gathering, a small dinner, or you can have Volunteers of the Year awards, have small prizes for them. These are all small things you can do to help boost your confidence and motivation. Another point is support, which, providing support to your volunteers to have there someone they can talk to will help them feel supported and will improve their volunteer experience. I'm sure you're all thinking that you're all very approachable. You know, your volunteers can come to any of you to address any concerns, but in a moment of maybe stress or anxiety, it will really help if there is one person who comes to mind straight away that they can go to talk about their concerns. Someone within your community group who, alongside their responsibilities in the community group, can be the one, volunteers go to address concerns. Next slide, please.
So here we decided to provide a summary of volunteer management and their three important aspects: recruitment, management, and retention. So recruitment, how do we find the right people and enough of them? So obviously always provide a clear and detailed description of the role, so you find the best people for the role. Inclusivity, so you find so everyone can be inclusive and can find themselves in the organizations. Always state the benefits of the role, and be present on social media and active on social media so you can recruit as many people as you can. And obviously, like word of mouth, the more people know about it, the better, and more people will come. Management, how would you facilitate the volunteer participation? Make it easier to register availability, communicate with volunteers, set a database, provide flexibility, and obviously include as well more languages. And the last part would be retention, and how can we improve our volunteer experience, set clear goals, create motivation, create recognition as well. So the volunteers are valued for their work and they feel appreciated. Provide training and have tools, how to make them better and how to grow, and support as well. So they always know how, if they need to talk to someone, they will always have someone. Next slide. So I would like to thank everyone for joining us, and hopefully I will see you next time, which will be on the 13th of July, and our webinar will be about budgeting. And if you have any questions right now, you could pop them in the chat, or you could just unmute yourself and ask us, or we can have a little discussion.
I just want to start things by saying thank you so much. That was really packed with really useful info across the recruitment management and retention. And if anyone has any questions to get going, do unmute and ask, or if you prefer to put in the chat, feel free to do that. or it'd be great as well to hear any kind of personal experiences across those different areas of working with volunteers, the recruitment, the management, the retention, across that journey. So feel free to unmute.
Hiya, I'm Shanjit Bala. I just want to ask you, do you have like a template for recruiting volunteers, that what we need to look for and what forms what areas we need to cover, what details we need to cover with the volunteers? We do have some volunteers come through university, but otherwise the outside volunteers, sometimes they come and, some of them I have mostly good experience, but sometimes I had a really bad experience as well. So I'm talking the both ways. I mean, the youngsters been quite good and been doing very helpful work and all that, and they follow what we ask them to do. And when it comes to women of my age, I had a real big issue. She was just jealous as anything, why I'm so successful with the work I'm doing. And then she started stating problems and getting contact with my volunteers and trying to put them against me. And then she started to go and stir up with other people who were benefiting the services, and then trying to find out the inside information. And then I simply says, I can't discuss any matters unless it's my committee members. It was great learning for me that, which I never experienced in 9 years, something like this. And this person is still harassing me throughout the other people. How can I handle that?
I mean, absolutely believe that you must have already spoken to managers, or like you must have already spoken to people that are higher up in your organizations. And
I'm the one who's a chairperson.
It's an interesting situation, that, isn't it? The politics of volunteer management, which can become quite complicated. So you went from kind of the question around what are the best things to look for when you're recruiting volunteers,
That's
into
right,
kind of the politics of having to manage difficult volunteers. So do you want to tackle that first question, Vanessa or Fiorella, on kind of what to look for in the volunteers that you're recruiting?
Yeah, I think a first point that maybe we could address is, recruiting in the first place. I think obviously your organization wants to include as many people as you possibly can. Anyone who approaches you, you want to welcome them into your community. But sometimes to prevent these situations, it might be best to set a maybe stricter recruitment process, have everyone have a short interview with you just to make sure that their interests are aligned with yours, that they understand what the community group is about, what things they're expected to do, things they can expect from you. I think having a short interview, application process might prevent these issues from, coming up in the future.
Yes, because in a short interview, you can definitely understand someone's real intention and someone's true colors. Like you can have a chat with them and you can ask them questions and maybe understand if they actually research the company, the organizations, if they know why they actually want to volunteer or if it's just for other purposes. So definitely the best thing would be a short interview and have a chat. You can definitely understand their personality a bit more. So it would be the best idea. This is the advice I would give as well.
I'm just going to add a little bit at the end of that to say that it can be difficult. Managing volunteers takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And the idea of having to sit down and interview each person who comes along sounds like another thing on the to-do list when you've got plenty else to be getting on with. But part of really being able to bring on board a useful team of volunteers and make sure that they have the skills that you need to support what you're doing is managing that recruitment and making sure that people are aligned with the work you're doing. And as with any kind of process of recruitment, making sure that you're going to be able to work together, because we can't all work with everyone, especially in small organizations where it does get political. Just having some kind of a process, like an interview, as these guys suggested, to make sure that you know that they have the skills and that you can get on together in the workplace.
Also, like a phone interview, if it doesn't even have to be in real life or a Zoom call, maybe just a phone interview, 10-15 minutes. Maybe try to understand as well if they're able to work in a team, with a team. I think that's one of the main
You're
things.
talking very fast. I can't catch you, my
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm
senior citizens. We are slowed down in our lives. So I'm struggling to catch up what you're trying to say. The other girls are okay.
I would definitely say teamwork skills are the best one. I've worked in a volunteer association. I've worked for St. Luke's and I worked for Harrow Cup. And definitely say what made us successful as a team was working all together. No one tried to say something that would be rude against our manager or rude against us as well. So, and working together and offering each other advice or maybe asking for help was definitely the best thing. So maybe in the interview or in the short phone call or whatever you want to do to get to know them, it would be the best thing to try and figure out if they have those skills. Try to understand if they can work in a team. So maybe you could ask, have you ever worked in a team, and how do you handle a problem? Have you ever handled a problem with your manager? So and try find out how they found a solution for that problem. And then you can understand if they're a calm person, if they're relaxed, if they're able to communicate perfectly, nicely with their managers and with their colleagues. And if they don't, maybe they're not worth hiring because it might just create problems within the organization and you don't want that really.
Do you have any information for us to learn more about how to recruit volunteers and what signs to look for, and if there's an issue, how to handle the issue, things like that?
At the moment, we do not have, but we could definitely create a small Word document and we could send it to you along with the PowerPoint presentation. But I honestly, you will get the PowerPoint presentation as well. And you will, this Zoom call, sorry, is recorded. So you will be able to rewatch it as well if you want to.
And we'll be sending a kind of a document that we put together last year on volunteer management as well. So we'll add that into the follow-up email, and that has some further nuggets of information in there. Yeah. Are there any other questions right now, or anyone want to share their experience of managing difficult volunteers or getting the most out of their volunteers? No? Okay.
Maybe if you want to share some tips for the other organization as well, maybe something that you've learned that might help other people as well. Anything that you can think of.
It is always useful in a forum like this, thinking about the fact that we are all involved in community action and supporting organisations, big or small, formal or informal, that are engaged in direct community action. And so we all have kind of a similar ballpark of experience. So if anyone does have any advice to add to this session, to share with others, that is really helpful. And equally, if anyone has any questions around accessing funding, which is what the Action Funder platform is all about, please do ask those.
I need like a direct contact number with the funders. So sometimes it's a problem to understand the email, and it's good to discuss about the funding and or any other issues we have due to my English is my second language. And this is the little issue I'm facing when I do not have a volunteer on the board. on the spot. So sometimes it's good to talk and understand. I communicate. I gain more information through communication rather than emails. That helps me better. So
Okay.
I mean, yeah. So
So
if I have to ask any question, I can ask, on the phone. It's easier.
the
And
funding that's available on Action Funder, so there are, is it 7 funds live at the moment, Pareen? 6 funds, maybe?
I think 6, because one closed and another one's closing tomorrow.
Okay, there you go. So 6,
could
nearly
you
5.
send us information about what funding is available at the moment, please?
So the way that the platform works is that you post a project you're looking for funding for, and if and when a relevant fund comes up on the platform, you'll be automatically notified.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
rather than applying for a specific fund, you're just posting your project. And then any funds that come up that are relevant will be matched. And so it's quite important on this particular platform not to think about meeting a certain funder's criteria, because you could be funded by any of the businesses putting community action funding onto the platform. So while I can see that picking up the phone and having a conversation with the funder can be really useful, and it's often something that I would advise in the general kind of grant funding process, pick up the phone, have a chat, say, I'm doing this project. Is it going to be relevant? What should I pull out? What are you particularly looking for? It's a really useful thing to do. But when it comes to Action Funder, actually, not so much. Just going straight onto the platform and putting up whatever it is that you're looking for funding for is the way to go. And there are a couple of different guides on the site that you'll see as you go through the process of signing up and posting a project that you're looking for funding for. So do take a read of those, and you can get in touch with us at hello@actionfunder.org with any questions you have along the way. I'm not sure now that we're all remote working, I can never remember who has our phone, our office phone, but we all use our mobiles as well. And if having a conversation over the phone is something that you really need, then we can definitely set that up. That was a long response to a short question. And I think if nobody has any other questions right now, we could wrap and say, let's bring 10 minutes back into our day.
Sorry, I'm just going to spoil everyone's day there. I do apologise, Lorna. Just very quickly, as we've all been impacted by the pandemic over the last 18 months, has anyone got any kind of number one tips as to how they've adapted to that in regards to volunteering? So to be able to kind of shift from maybe face-to-face, people coming into the premise, etc. What's the number one change that you've had to apply to continue to keep the volunteers, keep them engaged, but also adapt to this new way of working?
I can provide a bit of answer on this, as I'm a volunteer myself for an organization, and so we don't necessarily need to be in premises, but we've installed more frequent meeting. Like we have an all team meetings every 2 weeks, just to kind of like touch base, see how's everyone doing, how we can all participate on project. And that's turned out to be really useful, and actually something that we'll be carrying on in the future as well.
Thank you.
And I think my experience of in-person volunteering, it's been a case of those managing having really clear setup of, as these guys were explaining, clear kind of spreadsheet setup, clear management of who is going to be where, when, so that the safeguarding protocols can be carefully followed, which is an obvious thing to say. But I think, yeah, between the kind of remote meetups and the careful management of in-person, those have been my experience. Fiorella, looked like you're about to say something and I interrupted.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. No, I was just going to say that I'm the president of our society. And one thing that we've done to ensure that the society keeps growing throughout the year and also is still motivated it's definitely doing Zoom class or webinar or anything that would involve as many people as possible. So they still know that there is a society and there is someone that to support you. So I think making sure that that you're still in touch with them, even though it's remote, I think is definitely the best advice. And also I was going to say that there is a message in the group chat, so in the chat, so if you just...
Yeah, I can pick that one up as well, Colleen, on the average timeline in posting a project and securing funding on Action Funder. At the moment, we have funds that are live for 4 weeks. So you have 4 weeks to put in your application, and then there's about a week, 2 weeks of panel and judging from the funders. So so if you'd be posting, you'd have 4 weeks to post, then about 1 or 2 weeks after deadline to get an answer. And then the project delivery would span on 10 weeks, but it really depends on the funders at the moment. I think ideally you'd have to have your project well on the way within 10 weeks, but if they love your project and your project will take 6 months and you'll still have something to show in 10 weeks, they will fund you as well. It's really up to showing your impact, and yeah.
How can we request for the application? Because we are looking for funding for yoga for all, for flexibility on Zoom, and also we have a disability community allotment which we would like to. It's an existing project, but we would like to keep it going. So we need a funding to improve the whole area as well.
So if those are 2 projects, you can post those 2 projects separately under your organisation profile and seek funding in both of those areas. And it really is a much quicker process. If you are accepted for funding, it's a much quicker process than the generic grant funding process. So that, as Pareen said, if you are accepted for funding by a fund match, then it'll be a case of having the funding in your bank account within a matter of weeks. It's a quick turnaround.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trying to keep it quick and easy. That's the idea.
Funding match means, do we have to pay some of it from the organization?
No, so we're using the word match to describe when the project that you're looking for funding for matches with the fund that a funder puts onto the platform. And that's when you'll see a match occur, and it happens automatically. So we're working with that language. I know different platforms, different funders use different jargon. It can get quite complicated. So any feedback on that front is always welcome. And seeing as it's 10 past, I'm just going to wrap up by saying thank you so much to the 180 team, the 2 of you. It's been really great to have you here today, and I'm looking forward to the next session, which is going to be on Tuesday the 13th over lunchtime, all about budgeting. So how to create a successful budget for your project, which is always an important part of a grant application, as well as simply an important part of running a successful project. So we'll send round details of that session in an email that will also include the recording, the brilliant slides that the 180 team shared today, and also the guide that I mentioned earlier to volunteer management. So thank you, Vanessa, thank you, Fiorella, and thanks everyone for coming along. Any other questions, do get in touch with the email that Pareen put into the chat. That's hello@actionfunder.org. And hope you have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you very much for lovely sessions and lovely girls. And God bless you. Have a lovely day.
You too, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much. It was our pleasure.
So, Pareen, it might be a good idea to put the last few people into the waiting room. Sometimes people get a little bit stuck in the room. And let's just pause the recording
Yeah, I don't know.